e4. And Firouzja responds back with the Sicilian. He plays c5. The knight comes out to f3. And black goes pawn to d6. d4, the open Sicilian is on the board. Takes on d4. Knight takes. And we're going to see the Sicilian knight, or I believe knight to f6 comes out, and Gukesh brings his knight out as well, and we have a6. This is the Sicilian Najdorf, and Gukesh plays very quickly bishop e2. Maybe one of the more positional systems out there. You play your bishop out, e5 attacking the knight, and then you castle at some point. First saving the knight, knight to b3. And he goes bishop e7, also developing his piece, getting ready to castle. Short castles for white. And short castles for black. This line was actually very much a favorite of Anatoly Karpov, but he used to play bishop e3, a4 and then f4. This move rook e1 is a little bit tricky. It has not been played so much, and this was actually played between Aronian and Firouzja. In this position, Aronian had played f3 against Firouzja, but Gukesh goes bishop f1, and now a5 is played. We are already in fresh territory, fresh terrain here. Knight d2 played to get the knight perhaps to c4, to e3, and then the weakened d5 square, but bishop g4. Black often in the Sicilian is fine with that weakness because he plays around other squares. The bishop comes back to e6, and now the knight jumps in. The knight jumps in to c4, attacking the d6 pawn, looking here, and knight to d4, a good move because you want to play rook c8 next and put pressure on the c4 knight. So he pushes a4 to avoid black from gaining further space with a4, and now comes rook to c8. Look at the times on the clock. Gukesh has 1 hour 34 minutes while Firouzja has 56 minutes. So this has definitely been a big opening success for Gukesh, as he has close to 40-minute time lead. Knight h5 played here. Very interesting move with the idea of knight f4, bishop h4 and also f5. He goes g3. I think an interesting move. There was another move, knight b5, which was more complex but also pretty good. But g3 stops bishop h4, and the ideas to sacrifice on g3 are now not possible. So queen b6 played, trying to put pressure here. You can't get your knight to d5 because of knight f3 double check here. So king h1, first moving the king to the side. And now Firouzja comes back, knight to f6. The d5 square is soft, but it has been taken care of. Knight b5, trying to get rid of this knight, but knight d7. The point being, if you play c3, there is bishop b3. Hence, you can't kick the knight. So the rook comes up. He has plans of pushing now c3, but knight to c5. You will see that again, c3, you have knight db3 here. He goes knight back to c3. Now this time wants to come on the d5 square, and there is no knight that can control this square from f6. So queen goes back to d8, and now knight d5, knight d5. These are few options here. Although the best move is knight c d5. He jumps in with e d5. A mistake here. The mistake is very subtle because Firouzja has 22 minutes and he has to figure out that the best move here is knight a6 to come to b4. It's a very tough move, but he finds it. Amazing chess by Firouzja. He goes knight a6, and now knight b4 is a big threat. coming at the c2 pawn. Also, bishop d5 cannot be met with knight d5 as c2 would be hanging. So he takes on a6. But he gives up his very, very precious bishop here on f1. Bishop takes a6, takes back, b takes a6. And now bishop e3, attacking the knight on d4. He takes bishop d5 and ed5. Firouzja, who has 14 minutes on the clock as compared to Gukesh's 36, suddenly starts making all the most amazing moves in the position. Queen d3, attacking the rook, threatening bishop d4, rook d4, and taking the pawn on a6. But queen c8 played. Very lovely move, defending here, also defending the a6 pawn. So bishop takes on d4, and the rook takes back, attacking the queen here. The queen comes back, and black is definitely here for choice. f5. Yes, he plays it. f5 is on the board. Gukesh brings his rook into the game. Rook to b3, and now bishop g5. With the idea of rook d2 coming in, he goes f4. Somehow trying to make things super complicated, but this is a mistake as Alireza takes the pawn, and I think Gukesh's main idea here is to enter with a check. Now, taking the queen is a good move because takes, rook e8, and black is already having a great position. But somehow Firouzja goes king h8, allowing Gukesh to take. Rook takes c8. And now rook to b6. And the point being that after these two pawns are attacked, he takes on g3. And if you count the number of pawns on the board, black is a pawn up right now. But now one of the pawns on d6 and a6 are falling. He goes pawn to h6, just taking care of the back rank issues, and rook d6 would be a good move, but he takes on a6. And bishop comes to d2. Well, I think Gukesh has this very nice move, knight b5, in mind. Wonderful move, actually. So that if you take here, I take back on d4, and I'm completely fine. So he takes the pawn on d5. Now the d6 pawn is weak, but firstly, this is hanging here on e1, so rook e2 played. And Firouzja chops off the pawn on c2. He has 1 minute 39 seconds. Gukesh has 5 minutes 27 seconds. But somehow Gukesh will be able to handle this. He takes on d6. Rook takes on d6. Knight takes d6. And now f5 pawn is a bit soft. So he takes on b2. And knight f5 is possible. But king g2, what a beautiful move. Because if you went knight f5, then check, and then you would just remove the bishop here, and black is really better. But king g2, this pawn pin remains, and he now has to trade the rooks. And takes the pawn. Knight takes f5. So 40 moves have been completed. We are now in a bishop versus knight endgame. It's a very interesting endgame, I must say, because the pawn on a file is the same as the queening square that is controlled by the bishop. So in a way, that's an advantage to black. Like white cannot sacrifice his knight for 2 pawns here. Black would still be winning. So here Firouzja has excellent winning chances, although the engine gives this position as drawn and equal. One thing that Gukesh is amazing, by the way, in such positions is his ability to keep fighting. King f6 played, knight comes back to e3. And Firouzja goes king to g5, bringing the king in, putting pressure on the g4 point. And now knight to c4, attacking the bishop and the pawn. He goes bishop c3, defending the pawn here. And now knight comes back to e3, again defending the pawn. Bishop e5. The knight goes back. I guess for Firouzja, a great setup here. Could very well be g6, h5. But the problem then is, once you have a passer here, like imagine you go g6, h5, I take. I can actually sacrifice my knight for the a pawn and put my king on h1. Then it's a draw. So when to actually push the pawns is a big question. So g6, he plays it, but I'm pretty sure he won't do h5 immediately, because that would just clarify Gukesh's path to a draw by just knight c4, knight a5. So knight to d5 played, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes to d6. Firouzja down to a minute on the clock again. So he's thought a lot here, but hasn't gotten what he would have wanted. King h4 played by black. And this is what Firouzja is trying. Oh, by the way, a very bold move by Gukesh. Bishop f4. And now this one, knight c4, is a must. The thing is, king g4, knight a5. It looks like white should be losing here with h5. But somehow, miraculously, this pawn being there gives white good chances. So Firouzja defends the a pawn and Gukesh comes back with his knight. Wow. It's incredible. And now Firouzja comes up bishop e5. Maybe Gukesh can go back knight c4. This king to g2 is a very interesting move because it stops black's king h3. Bishop c3, knight comes back to e3. So bishop comes up to b4 now. And he moves the king up. King to f3 played. And king h3. So black gets what he wanted. Gukesh goes knight c4. And now h5 makes a lot of sense. Because if you think about it, in this position after takes, you can't sacrifice your knight. This is lost because the king can no longer go to h1. So he must keep the knight now. Knight e5. And this got very exciting now. You can see Firouzja has a minute on the clock. He goes bishop d6, attacking the knight. Knight to f7, attacking the bishop here on d6. And bishop c7 played. You know, many times the knight gets dominated by the bishop. I have to be careful. He moves his king to h2, hoping for h2, h3 plan. And Gukesh has to be super careful here. Knight e4 played. He goes bishop d8. He's not pushing the pawn easily. Knight to f2. And bishop e7. And he goes knight to d3. And bishop d6, improving the bishop's position. He goes knight f2. And the bishop goes back to b8. Comes up knight to e4. Bishop a7 played. And he attacks the pawn. Knight to f6. This pawn is going to fall. He pushes forward h4. And he brings his knight back to e4. Wow, very intense. It might seem that the bar is not moving at all, but just one mistake and everything's over here. King g4. That's a good move because now if h3, then knight g5, and you lose the pawn. So bishop d8, trying to defend the pawn, and he goes knight f2. King g2 played, and the knight settles down on the h3 square. Now the plan is to play knight f4. He starts moving with his king. Firouzja says, I'm going here to win the pawn. Knight f4 played, king f2. So he has to keep eye on two things. One is stop white from sacrificing the knight for this pawn. But here's the threat now. Knight takes h4. Goes king e3. Now this path has opened up for the king to go and settle down. So yes, knight e5. Knight h4 was a blunder here. Or actually, it's also a draw. Oof. But knight e5 makes so much more sense. Interesting that knight h4 also worked. Knight c4. And this is exactly what Gukesh wanted. King d4. Check. He takes the pawn. Finally, finding this draw. Bishop a5. And king takes h4. Gets the pawn. a5 played. Bishop a5 and a draw. A mammoth defensive effort. And of course, Gukesh would definitely have forgotten that in the opening he was trying to do some things, trying to press, because Firouzja for the majority part of the game pressed. And somehow Firouzja says, I should have done this thing, maybe h5 directly. And maybe both the players are interested to analyze with each other, because there's no other game happening in the room. And maybe they could put up the position on the board. Maybe I can put up a separate video on their analysis